I want to ask you about your musical tastes.
Yes.
You mentioned Schubert.
Yes.
What,
Yes.
do you have is he your favorite composer?
Well, one of them, and
do you listen to Bach? Yes.
Bach and Mozart, Beethoven. I mean, I'm afraid it's a fairly conservative kind of taste. Haydn. I used to. I haven't been for a long time. I used to go to the opera fairly often. Yeah. So I mean, I used to know lots of musicians when I was younger. I don't know them so well
Classical
now.
musicians.
Mainly classical musicians, yeah. Yeah. And you know, people would say, well, your dislike of what is it called? Death metal,
Eagles of death metal.
Yes, Eagles of death metal. It is just prejudice against what seems to me to be demotic and. But that's not so. I mean, one of the things about a lot of Western popular music is it seems so completely savage to me by comparison with the popular music of almost any other area of the world. So, such as African or Arabic or Indian or South or Latin American, these, I mean, well, I could, I haven't got the book here. The man writing the book I've just told you about says he went to this concert where they were singing of fun and sex, okay? And then he says, life, in other words, life. Well, this seems to me a very crude view of what life is. And what about, and certainly of music, I mean, what about love rather than just sex, or happiness rather than fun?
Yes.
And it seems to me that the connection between love and sorrow, of course, and so on, is much stronger, shall we say, in African music, African popular music now, than in our music. So it is actually we who have become uncivilized in this respect. And
that's remarkable.
The same is true of, you know, Arabic music or you know, Indian music or Latin American music. To me, it's in. I mean, it may not be my favorite music, but it doesn't have this. It doesn't, to me, have this hatred of life that this horrible Eagles of death metal et al. I mean, they're not the only ones. They're not even the worst ones.
No.
They're far from the worst. I mean, I was once sent by a newspaper to one of the worst. I would never, of course, go to any of these concerts. But anyway, they sent me to one. And this particular group specialized in urinating over the audience, while calling the audience, you motherfuckers. Now, there were thousands of people who wanted to go to this. And I mean, they were not musically accomplished or anything like, what on earth is going on that people want this?
Yeah.
Another one I went to, this was in Glasgow, they sent me to go. So this time I identified myself as not a reporter, but someone who was going to write about the concert, so-called concert, for a newspaper. So the first thing the press secretary, or whatever you call it, did was to give me some earplugs. So I said, does this not strike you as a little odd that you give someone earplugs who is going to supposed to listen to music and report on it? And they said, oh, this is normal. You know, it's to prevent the tinnitus of the ringing in the ears off. Well, I mean, what kind of world is that?
Yeah.
It's And that's the world I think that probably your prisoners are largely living in.
Yeah.
Musically, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think I'm that. It's not that I'm completely closed-minded. It's just that I think some things are horrible, and
yeah. No, they are horrible, and honesty is the best policy. But too few people think that way.
Well, the other thing that's very interesting is that when I wrote about this, I used to write a column in a Belgian newspaper. And I said something about this. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was probably very similar, something similar to what I've said to you. And it produced howls of outrage. There is no subject on which people feel so deeply, actually, or at least.
Than the vulgarity of their music?
Yes, well, they don't like being told that their music is vulgar. It's almost, it's worse than telling someone that he smells. Or perhaps the same, but except that I was telling hundreds of thousands of people that they smell.
When you write for a Belgian publication, do you write in French?
No, I wrote it in English. It was for Flemish, actually. It was a Flemish publication. So, yeah, and I didn't write for it for very long. But I write all over the place. So I write a bit in Brazil now.
Yes. You've mentioned that this popularity in Brazil, you found it very surprising.
Yes.
And people from Brazil have told you that they recognize everything that they've read in your books from their own lives in poor parts of Brazilian metropolises.
Yes. Yes.
I recognized when I read your writings on architecture, I immediately recognized my own surroundings from my childhood in Sofia, which was I was surrounded by Soviet style brutalist tower blocks, and it made me appreciate more the humanity of traditional Bulgarian architecture. For example, from the late the mid to late 19th century Bulgarian architecture. We call it the Bulgarian Revival.
Yeah.
It opened my eye when I read your thoughts on brutalism. It opened my eyes to the warmth of this much more humane style of building. It struck me immediately that these beautiful houses from the mid 19th century in rural Bulgaria were built by unschooled people, by peasants, a merchant would pay the most skilled artisan to design and build a house.
Yeah.
And then 100 years later, professional architects and construction engineers educated in Sofia and maybe even Moscow would come up with these monstrosities.
Yes.
And they're still there.
Yeah. And the worst of it is that people will not admit what has been done. I mean, I'm in Paris, as you probably know, I'm in Paris at the moment, and it's very difficult to think of a single building after the Second World War which does not detract from the beauty of the city.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to think of any. There are hundreds which are monstrous. And they're not even monstrous in the huge, just because they're huge. I mean, some of them are only the same size as the 19th century buildings. but they're hideous. And they've done this with the example before them, before their very eyes. They can see what has been done.
Yes.
I mean, of course, there are people who say, oh, well, we can't build in the same way for various reasons, the materials or the cost of labor or whatever it is. But that's a different argument from saying that it's good architecture.
I don't understand this. Of course, I'm not an architect, but I don't understand if it's possible to build a brand new place like Dubai from scratch.
Yes.
How is this less difficult than building a new Bath or a new Florence?
I don't know. I don't know. You'll be interested to know that in the 1950s, the Council of Bath wanted to pull it all down, and would have done so if there had not. They wanted to build sort of Novosibirsk-on-Avon there, and they would have succeeded if the population had not sufficiently protested. As it is, they managed to destroy quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And this has happened all over. I mean, in Britain, after the Second World War, of course, there was a lot of bomb damage, but much of it could have been repaired, but they didn't want to repair it. Mm-hmm. And if you take Coventry, for example, Coventry was one of the finest medieval cities in Europe, but it was true, it was bombed. And what they've built now is a kind of World Heritage Site of modernist monstrosity. Mm-hmm. Unbelievably awful. I mean, it's so awful, it's almost comical. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost funny, except, of course, that people have to live in it. What is, to me, extraordinary is that the architectural profession refuses to see what has been done, or to admit it.
Within the realm of music, there are fashions, short-lived fashions, and they are forgotten very quickly. I think that's our only consolation. But in architecture, it stays.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, if I write a very bad poem, I mean, I don't write poems, but if I were to write a very bad poem, no one would have to read it. But if I build a very bad, especially a very bad large building, people can't avoid it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. You don't have to listen to my music, but if I build something across the street from you, it's now part of your life forever.
Yeah, well, yeah, until it's pulled down, when it will be replaced by something even worse.